Cathal, welcome to Limerick.
Thank you.
Can you just give us the background of the start of the last 22-year journey to where we are today, from say Ballyfermot College onwards?
Okay, so I guess my journey is more of the journey of the reluctant entrepreneur. I never thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I thought I wanted to be a guard like all my family. My dad, my sisters, my granddad, everybody in my family was a guard, but I failed maths in my leaving cert, so I couldn't become a guard. So I went to Ballyfermot College and studied animation, and then I got kicked out of college for making short films. So I said, what am I going to do? So I said, well, I'll set up a small animation company when I say a small animation company, I said, I didn't want to work in Don Bluth because ironically I didn't want to work in a factory. I thought the big studios were uncreative and I was a pure artist and I wanted to make short films.
So for the younger members of our audience, can you explain Don Bluth?
Don Bluth was a studio on Cunningham Road in the early 90s. They did An American Tale and Land Before Time. So I didn't want to work in a big studio. And so I went to college and got kicked out. And then myself and my buddy Dara, we went to Bank of Ireland, coincidentally, in 2 College Green, and our mammies met, and they went guarantor on a €2,000 bank loan. So that was how we started off. So that was the only capital that we had, and we got a commission then to do a TV series for RTE, and that was our first job. So we knew nothing about business. We were making this show for RTE. Didn't have a clue what we were doing, in over our head. It was a piss take on Peg Sayers for anybody who did Peg in their leaving cert. So then that was about 1994. So I mean, what happened since then was that it's like I've been in 7 different businesses. Every 3 years we've had a different business with the same name over the door, because the company has changed beyond recognition almost every 3 years. We've gone from analog to digital. We've gone from digital service to creating our own IP, from commercials to TV series, so you can chart all the different paths of the business. And I think the key for me was, as soon as things are going well, that's the time you start hearing the cracking ice, and it's to reinvent yourself before you get to the top of that curve and move on to the next thing. So it's been a crazy journey, but the truth of it is, when you talk about it as 22 years, it actually feels like it's been about 5 years, and I actually feel like a startup as well. I still feel like I go into work every day and it's whack-a-mole. You don't know where to start. There's so much to do and so much to fix, and I really feel that we still have a long trajectory ahead of us yet, so it's...
So just go back to Ballyfermot College. You were expelled basically for making short animations. Isn't that the point of an animation college?
Yeah, so now I have to say Ballyfermot College now are brilliant. We get on great with them, and it's a very, very different era. But there was one particular teacher who was constantly been trying to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I never connected, but one particular teacher who didn't like what I was doing. I was kind of doing all these arty short films in my spare time, like I was animating Picasso paintings and doing all this crazy stuff, and they wanted everybody to work in Don Bluth, and I was like, so I was just about passing my coursework, but then I was doing all this in the background, and I set up the Irish Animation Festival as well, and I was involved in Animu, which was a resource centre for animation. So I was really involved in a lot of animation activities, trying to build the animation industry at the time, which didn't exist. We're actually the oldest animation company. And now there's 3 people working for me that weren't born when we started the company. So I mean, like, that just really breaks my heart, But
so Dara and yourself were school friends?
Yeah, we were pals in college, yeah.
So when you started then with your $4,000, what were you actually producing? What was the plan then?
It was $2,000
in total, right?
Parents went guarantor for $1,000 each.
$1,000 each. Okay.
And 2 years ago we had our 20th anniversary, And we brought our, our mammies were there. we gave them these big novelty checks with the £2,000 back.
Brilliant. Great story. So yourself and Dara set up, and what was the plan when you actually opened the doors initially? What what type of animation were you making? Was it advertising? Was it creative?
No, we didn't have a plan. We really didn't. We didn't know what business was. Genuinely, we were naive. After we signed the contract with RTE, I rang them up and said, does that budget include VAT? And they said, no, VAT is extra. And I said, well, how do I get a VAT number, So, I mean, there was a lot of naive mistakes. Yeah. So we kind of learnt on the fly. We'd very little, we'd no business training, and all of a sudden we were running this tiny little business. And after we finished production on Peg, we got some service work out of a company in England to do animation on Wolves, Witches and Giants for a studio in the UK, and we did the animation on that. So for the first 3 years in our business, we didn't even have a computer. It was all analog, so we had an electric typewriter that we used to type up our invoices on, send them off, all 3 of them a year, whatever it was. And we had a photocopier, so the internet wasn't even invented. It was, so I mean, like that's kind of like that's the reality of it. It was a very analog business. So, and then we got our first computer in about 1997, I think it was. And we thought we were in NASA. It was like a Pentium Pro 200 or something. And it was.
What was the process originally for creating animation?
So yeah, I mean, it's back then. Animation was 12 drawings a second. You used to have to draw out everything, and then you'd get it photocopied onto acetate. I mean, this is like museum stuff now. You'd get it photocopied onto acetate. You'd have 4 levels so you'd put the head on one level and the body on the next, so you wouldn't have to redraw the body and the head, and then you'd have to lip sync in another chart. And it was torturous. There's no nostalgia for it. Then you'd shoot it all on a 35mm rostrum camera, then you get it telecined, and then you'd sync it up with the sound, and then you'd realize that film is 24 frames and digital is 25 frames, and it's all out of sync. And it was very difficult.
And how long were Don Bluth in Dublin then? As you were growing, were they still operating, or had they moved on?
They went into liquidation just as we started off the company. So we were literally a startup with our £2,000 bank loan, and we went down to Don Bluth and blew that £2,000 and bought all their equipment, which was great,
Nice.
So we still have one of the Don Bluth drawing desks in the studio, and his co-founder Gary Goldman was in the office there about 3 Christmases ago, and he was like, "Oh my God," he was getting nostalgic, and I was going, "Get out of it," It was like. And
did they sort of set the precedent in Ireland for animation as an industry? Like, did they open some doors for you in that way, or? Well,
not really. I mean, they were a bit like, a Zanussi washing machine on a desert island. I mean, they didn't really help grow an infrastructure. They were just this like Intel out in Leixlip. There's no other semiconductor firms in Ireland. But they were great at the time, and we have about 8 or 10 ex-Don Bluth employees at the moment with us, but that's just probably a coincidence more than anything, because most of them went off to America and then came back to Ireland. But I mean, it was great at the time. Like, it captured people's imaginations, and they made amazing short or feature films. But I suppose for me personally, it never really had any impact on us, and maybe it should have, and I wouldn't have made as many mistakes as I did in the early days.
So each time you got some business, you put the money back in, you just stuck at it, and gradually employed a few people?
Yeah, we never raised any investment in the company. We never had any debt, really. We had a couple of loans and photocopiers, so there was a lot of poverty, and we just grew the business slowly and organically. So Dara and myself, the 2 founders, were always the last to get paid. So when clients would sting you or whatever you're doing, working for advertising, and you're waiting 3 and 4 months to get paid, we certainly wouldn't get paid, So there was a lot of hand-to-mouth stuff in the first 10 years for us. And they were kind of heady times, because there wasn't that much animation happening, So you're kind of pioneering in a way. You've no other peer group to look to. And when I see the infrastructure now and the community that's there, it's very, very different. So it's a great time now to start a business.
And when you're looking at the States, like, where was the model for an animation company you would have aspired to being?
You know what? I think we went in with a lot of blind ignorance, you know. If I'd done a business plan, I probably would have said, no, there's no business here, get out of it, you know. So we just had a passion for animation, and that's all we wanted to do was create, was tell stories, was build a great product, was make great animation. And that was always the driving force for us. The business plan, the finance, all of that was secondary. And I don't want to sound glib when I say that now, but I mean, I still believe to this day that if you focus on the creativity and you make great product, that the business will come from that, you know. You know, today you go to Cannes, you go to all these markets, and people say, I got a great show, it'll sell loads of toys. And it's like, you know what? Make shows for 4-year-olds, make shows for 4.5-year-olds, you know who your audience is, and make shows for the audience and not for the toy shops, you know. And I think people who respect their audience and really truly understand their audience and make great work for them will have a far better chance of success.
But talking about toys, the business model in the animation business is ultimately to sell toys, isn't it? Which is kind of strange, but am I right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like finding out there's no such thing as Santa. It's like, you know, you love animation, but the truth of it is that toys pay for your mortgage, you know. So we're like a product and a service business, and one of our shows, Doc Mc Stuffins, some of you may be familiar with it, that came to us from Disney as a half a page of text, and Brona O'Hanlon, who's ex-Dunleary, designed the character designs, and we directed it, we animated it, produced it out of Smithfield. That show's in 150 countries around the world, and it's last year, I think it's pulling in $1 billion a year at retail. So that's all the lunch boxes around the world. So we don't own that, but it just gives you a sense of scale that, you know, when you get the story right, like we were always focused on making great animation for kids, you know, but there is a whole business around that to support that you know, is as good as any business out there.
And I believe Michelle Obama guested on that program.
Michelle did a voice for us. We've had a lot of you know, stunt casting, but because the show is very wholesome to children, and it's one of the first shows that has a black female character in a lead role, she really identified with it. And it wasn't for celebrity purposes, but if you think about it, most girls wanted to be nurses. You know, why couldn't girls be doctors, you know? Why couldn't they aspire to be doctors? I mean, so it starts in a young age, you know, and you're dealing with very formative years when, you know, kids are until they're 10 years of age. So there is a great responsibility when you're making shows that you make shows that really empower kids and have a good message. Excellent.
And the whole diversity thing, obviously you're ticking the right boxes there. Is that part of its success, do you think, that it appeals to a broad audience?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Nee, who created the show, I mean, I know she loved Doc. Doc was originally meant to be a boy, and we did a pilot for it, but then we changed it to a girl, you know, and you know, and that was that's what the whole creative process is, like, it's just things evolve. But I know Chris didn't set out to make a toy show, 100%. She's as creative as anybody I've ever met, and her heart really was in telling a great story for children. So she never set out to tick any boxes. Oh, if I have a black girl, it'll sell more toys. It was just really good stories, and, you know, as a toy doctor, captures kids' imaginations, and, you know.
Brilliant. At one stage you mentioned that you made a quote that computers are only expensive pencils.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Is that your line?
Yeah.
That's good. Can you expand on that a bit?
Well, I mean, like Brown Bag now, like we're as much of a technology company. I mean, if you came into the studio, it is a tech company. We've probably the same infrastructure in our IT comms room as the bank here. You know, it's really, really high tech, and all the computers are very expensive. Their software and hardware is probably 10 grand a pop. But, like, you know, the role of technology is to facilitate creativity, and everything that we do is to facilitate storytellers and animators do their job. So I think you know, when you look at computers and people talk about the power of technology, you know, that they're forgetting what the technology does. The technology enables content, and I guess you could apply that to a lot of the tech sector as well. Like, you know, people talk about the technology, But you know what? Technology is only there to get the product out there. So, you know, we started with pencils. Now we have expensive pencils, and I guess that's the that's the way it is. You know.
So a lot of our guests are traditional software as a service, not traditional, but software as a service, so the tech companies. And in that whole tech startup world, funding and investment has become like a buzzword, and it's all talk. I mean, often before the product is developed much at all, it's like, who's my next round and so on. And there's a bit of an obsession, maybe from Silicon Valley, but even a lot of Irish startups, you just get caught up in funding. And our last month's guest was Ronan Percival of Forest, and he was a big advocate of bootstrapping versus investment. Mm-hmm. And from what I gather, you guys never got investment and just bootstrapped all the way from zero to being a very, very successful company.
Yeah, 100% agree with Ronan on that one. I mean, there are two different ways to do it. Obviously, you've got a great product, you can't afford to get it off the ground, so you need to raise investment, and that's just life, you know. But the thing about it is, I see a lot of the startups, and they're more focused on their Series A and their next round of funding, and they wake up in the morning thinking about the funding, and then it becomes a full-time job for them, and they forget about the product. They forget about why they got into business in the first place. So there is a chicken and egg to it, and you know, every business is different, but there is an awful lot to be said for, like, if your business is good enough and you build enough traction, the funding is there. I mean, the truth of it is there's very little return on the stock exchange at the moment. You're probably getting less than 1% on it, you know. So all the private equity firms and the venture capital firms are out there. It's a wash with money out there if you want to get funding for your product, but don't go looking for it, you know. Let it find you. Build a really good product, and it's there. But you do see it. You do see a lot of people focused on the funding and not the product.
The education part of your business, as you went along, you set up Brown Bag Labs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so education is, you know, one of the things at the heart of Brown Bag is HR, is training and development. And it gets very, very hard as your business grows because, you know, it dilutes all the good work that you've put in. But we've always tried our best to really invest in training. So we have Brown Bag Labs, and we have a percentage of our payroll that's spent on training, whether you need it or not. You know what I mean? So we really do try our best to train everybody, because when staff come in, you know, just because you pigeonhole them as, oh, you're an animator, you're a technical director, everybody has a career path, you know, and otherwise you're going to lose them, you know. So, you know, the highest person in the company, from myself to any of the senior management right down, we have to do training, you know. So it's a big ethos in what we do, makes everybody better, and it makes for a learning organization.
So, I mean, because you come from a creative business, how would you reconcile that sort of left brain creativity at the start and that right brain business side of things? Was that a conflict, or did yourself and your co-founder sort of strike a balance in different respective skills? How did that work?
Well, just to the first part of that, I guess, I always say that, like, animation is like, you know, the magic of making commerce from art. Because I started off as an artist, and most people who get into animation college are artists. And how do you make money from art? I mean, it doesn't happen. And, you know, with animation, people, you know, kind of full-time jobs, career paths, timesheets, you know, all the kind of stuff that goes along with working in a steady, full-time, permanent position. And we've always tried to develop that. You know, how do you make commerce from art? And it's like, you know, as long as you're realizing what you're doing is you're making art, you know, it is art, but there's a business. And the creative economy is the one thing that I think Ireland Inc. Hasn't managed or promoted very well to date. I think up until now, it's always been seen as a second poorer cousin to all the great work that's happening in tech and pharma and all the other startups. And if you look at the whole downturn in the economy, the one part of the business that has thrived has been animation, has been computer games, has been all the web development and all the wonderful export-based, art-based creative companies. So to that end, anyhow, so with Dara and myself, like, I mean, we were both kind of artists. I used to be a director, you know, I used to animate. So like, how do you become a business person? I don't know. Jesus, we were like looking at one another and I said, well, look, I'm better at giving out than you are. I'll have a go of it. And so when it comes to chasing somebody for a check and all that, so it was very organic, and I kind of fell more naturally into it. But then, like I said, to the training, I constantly invested in training, and I trained myself. I went in business courses. I learned finance for non-financial managers. I did all those different courses at every step along the way. So forced myself to read the business post to figure out what the hell business was about, you know. That was all in the early days, you know. And Dara really focused on the creativity, and he became the director. So I produced the shows and he'd direct them, or, you know, then I ran the business and Dara was still directing, and, you know, we absolutely needed, you know, gold star directors, because that's what he is. Like, he's a fantastic director, and he's the creative director in the company now. So and we have 9 different directors working for us. So half of them are from overseas, and some of them are homegrown talents. So so it's still a bigger role. It's a much bigger role for him, and yeah. So I'm still, like, I probably have the shortest CV on LinkedIn. I've had one job, you know. It's like I went to college and went to Brown Bag. Yeah.
So, and you failed maths, and yet you ended up in Stanford studying strategy. So, yeah. I mean, does that say something about our education system, or?
I think I probably should have started with studying strategy in Stanford and skipped the first 10 years of poverty. No, so a couple of years ago I was very fortunate. Enterprise Ireland are really, really good as an organisation in Ireland, something we should be very proud of. And they were a great help to us over the years as we looked for training and development. So they would support us as I needed to train my senior management team around me. So we would go to them, and they would support for all the training as we learned how to become better people managers, how we all learned, you know, leadership skills, and all of those important things that are, you know, and we're actually only talking about it again, that we still need to do it in 2017. We're going to do a refresher, you know. But we did all that 3 years ago. Yeah, we're doing it again. So I ended up, there was a fantastic opportunity to go over to Stanford University with a whole bunch of CEOs from Ireland, from diverse backgrounds, and you know, we built up a great community out of that, and a lot of those are household name entrepreneurs now, and you know, it just goes to show you that you never stop your journey of learning. I think, you know, your investment in your own education should never stop. The day you stop learning and the day you think you know it all is the day you're, you know, that's the day to be very scared, you know.
So you're kind of saying, you know, chase excellence in what you do, and your passion, and the money will come, rather than trying to be strategic about business making money, or is it a
well, that's certainly the path I went down, and, you know, I know different businesses are different. I mean, it totally depends on what your business is, but truthfully, I firmly believe that if you really care about your product, if you care about your product and you believe it's brilliant, not that your product is going to make you money, you know, if it's the first option there, and you really have heart in what you do, you know, go for it, you know, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. We need to celebrate people who try things that don't work out more, because there's you know, that fear of failure keeps a lot of entrepreneurs awake, but the day you stop being afraid is, you know, I'm still afraid, like, you know, honestly, like, it's things are going really well now. We've a very big company in 4 different countries, and it's just bigger headaches, you know.
So 2 years ago, you exited, you sold your company for an undisclosed sum, which generally means a lot of money. So you could have just given up then, couldn't you, and said, I don't need to work. You don't need to work anymore. So what gets you out of bed in the morning if it's not to pay the mortgage?
So the backstory to that is, going back to the story I mentioned, that we grew our business, and every 3 years we brought it to a different business. So we were coming up to 21 years in business, and so year 20 I was like, okay, what's next for us? What is next? Because we had a very successful business, we had a long sales pipeline, we were very profitable, things were going really well for us, and all I was thinking of was like, oh my God, this could all go away in the next 2 years? How do I reinvent this? So I was looking at the value chain in the market, and I realized that we needed to move into distribution, we needed to move into owning our own IP, we needed to diversify into digital, and the whole range of things that I wanted to get involved in. Plus I felt we weren't innovating as much as we were, because we become a much bigger company. So in order to kind of catch the next wave, as it were, I went down the road and I started knocking on doors of private equity. For the first time, I said, right, okay, I need to raise money. And they said, how much do you need? And I said, look, I haven't got a full plan yet, but around about this much. And a load of offers started coming into me. Everybody wanted to get into bed with Brown Bag, which is great. And really high profile private equity firms in the US and UK and Ireland. And for me, that was going to be the next era. I was going to have a more accountable board. I was going to have debt in the business. I was going to have private equity funding, and I was going to grow it organically for another 3-5 years, and then look at an exit. And with that, then an opportunity came with another company out of Toronto, 9-story, and they said, hey guys, we'd like to buy you. And I was going like, I'd like to buy you, It's like we're both the same size, but what actually transpired was what we were really good at, they didn't have. What we didn't have, they were brilliant at, So they had distribution, they had private equity, they had fantastic business affairs and marketing and all of the wonderful things that are essential components for us to create and exploit our own Doc Mc Stuffins. And we had really good animation and processes and systems, and we were like, a really tight company. We had 2D in Manchester, we have another company in Manchester, and we had an office in LA and all that. So it was like more like a merger than an acquisition. So now in fairness, I did sell, and that's fine, but I didn't sell out to the sense that I sold truthfully to take us to the next level, because it's better to have a small slice of something big than a big slice of something small. And we're now one of, well, certainly before the deal, but certainly Brown Bag are one of the biggest European animation studios, but now we're one of the biggest independent companies in the world. So it's given us a wonderful platform. We have distribution, we have an amazing management team, we've got a very supportive private equity, and I just feel like a startup again. I actually feel like, okay, the next 5 years are going to be so much fun, so hard, but...
Amazing. So between Toronto, Dublin, Manchester and LA, how many have you got working directly for you now?
It's just under 600.
Wow.
So when we did the deal, I came in as the Group Chief Operations Officer. So I'm Managing Director of Brown Bag Films, UK and Ireland, and Group COO. So all the production and HR and technology report into me. So it's like, it's it's complex. Like it's big, and it's a big company, and it's trying to integrate those companies. Last year was a big challenge, but wonderful people. Like we really did the cultural litmus test before we did the deal. We really liked them. They really like us, we get on, and we have a shared passion. I think a lot of people who do deals with private equity or whatever, if there isn't that cultural litmus test, it won't work. You really have to be very careful with who you partner with, and because it isn't about how much money you get, because ultimately, it's about how much you enjoy what you do. Life's too short,
So as COO, you're open production, HR and
technology.
So obviously without the technology and production you wouldn't be producing products, but it sounds like HR is really important to you. From the early days, were you always directly involved? Obviously early on you were directly involved in the recruiting. As it got bigger and you got like HR managers presumably in different places, did you still retain sort of some control over the hires and the whole culture? What's your thoughts on HR in a large organization?
I think you hire your own problems. I think it's the role of a CEO, the role of anybody running their own business, is to make sure that you hire good people. I think all the problems in any business come from people. So be it your finance manager, be it whatever it is that you have, if you hire the wrong person, it can completely ruin your business, and just be so careful with that. I often say that it's like, it's like having a nice glass of water and pouring a small drop of my waddy into it and stirring it up. You put the wrong person in there, it will absolutely pollute everything, all the good work that you've done. So now, very, very fortunate in 22 years, it's just been something that we've been really keen to do, is to hire good people. And I always say hire to your culture, because like in Brown Bag, I don't care if you've come from Pixar, if you don't fit the culture of the company, you don't get in. Because culture in the business, like, how you do things, not what you stand for, it's what's it like to work in your organization? That's so important. And if you have a peculiar way of doing things, or you do things a certain way, you have to tell the people that. And if they're not suited to the business, don't bring them in. And it doesn't matter what their CV says. If they don't meet the culture of the business, they're the wrong person for the business.
Right. So your customers over the years have been people like Disney, and more recently like Netflix and Amazon Prime and stuff. Mm-hmm. That whole space of people being cord cutters from the traditional TV and all that. Where do you see that going? Like, I mean, Netflix are producing like amazing series and huge money, and where does that leave the likes of RTE and stuff like that? There's huge disruption at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, like, this is like the Renaissance. I mean, this is what we're living through now. Like, I mean, television is really going down the road of news, sports, current affairs, and the big karaoke contest on a Saturday night. The big live event, the X Factor, and everything else is going on demand. And so it's a wonderful time for disruption, but it's also a terrifying time to be in broadcasting. And it's like, that's why, like, public service broadcasters, really need to be clear about their mandate, and to take a pop at RTE for outsourcing all their children's programming is an absolute disgrace as a parent and as a license fee payer. I think it's just shameful that the people with the no voice children who have no voice. I mean, if they outsourced the orchestra, you'd probably have letters to the editor in the Irish Times for the next 6 months, and they'd bring it back. Sorry, was that a rant?
No,
sorry.
We like rants. So how would you run RTE?
With a scalpel, I'd go in there. No, but going back to the disruption. It is a wonderful time. Netflix just announced they're spending $6 billion on original content. I mean, that's just off the charts. Now, most of that is cash flow. They won't be paying that for years. But you're into an era now where this is like the golden era of content, and I think what's going to happen is all of the different, the Air and the Air TV and the Sky and all of that, they're going to they already have realised that to secure an audience, you need to have children. Like Netflix, 40% of their audience comes from kids. So before they invested in content, what they realized was that their subscription was like $7 or $8 a month. Everybody would sign up to Netflix, and then they'd realize they'd seen everything. They'd seen Die Hard years ago, and there's nothing new on it. And then he said, well, the kids watch it, I'll keep it on. I'll keep it, it's only $7 a month. And what's happened now is then they did Game of Thrones and various different shows like that. And then they saw their ratings increase, and they said, well, the future is in original content. But it's still kids. Kids are a really, really important part of that. And that's the same if you look at DirectX in the state, if you look at all the cable networks, or the wireless networks, the Aircoms of this world, that's really where it's at. So I think we're going to be in a period where animation is going to be a real
Are Netflix producing original animation content now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
That's
and
great.
Amazon Prime, I mean, is that
it's
not very big here yet, but I guess in the States it is.
I think it's coming out next month. We're in season 2 of a show for Amazon Prime at the moment, Stinky and Dirty. It's about a dustbin and a JCB. It's very no diversity in that, like, you know. But it's a great fun show, and we're into a second season of that, and that will hopefully, I think Amazon's plan is to release that everywhere they have a website, you know.
Wow.
So.
So is Doc Mc Stuffins like one of your leader product now in terms of coverage around the world?
Yeah, I mean it's one of them. I mean we have 9 shows in production. We're working on Watership Down. We've got like, you know, a whole range of different shows. We've I mean it is like it's industrial boutique. I mean like every show is precious to us, you know, every show really is really important to us. So it's not like a factory. The very factory I didn't want to work with when I came out of college, but it is very much like a really busy environment. You know, it's very like, it's not all, oh, those guys make cartoons, it must be so easy going. It's not, it's busy, it's stressful, we got work, you know, we got
Why do you say it's like a startup all over again right now with the new setup?
No, it's just, I mean, I love the energy of a startup. I love, you know, you wake up in the morning and you kind of go bolt upright in bed, oh, I have so much to do, you know, and so it's still like that. And, you know, you're rushing in to get into work before 8 in the morning before everyone comes in and starts emailing you. So it's, yeah, it still has that excitement. I still have the love for it, you know.
Brilliant. It comes through. Before we turn to the audience for Q&A, so we have a lot of students here from the Limerick School of Art and Design and LIT, and what sort of advice would you give to up and coming, you know, people who are going to graduate soon and are interested in animation? Would you tell them do what you did and just go for it?
I would have to say don't get kicked out of college. I think I'm the least qualified person working for me, so I would say stick with the college. Colleges are great. No, I mean, look, things are very different now than they were 20 odd years ago. I mean, I guess the thing is, it's about specialization now. I think years ago we would have taken on generalists, but now we kind of, like saying computer animation, it's we need modelers, then we need riggers, then we need texture artists, then we need fur groomers, you know, all of those different components. I mean, there's so many different ways to get into animation. Like people who study animation could make amazing production staff, you know. I may never use their animation talents, but they understand the process. I always believe where artists hire business people, it's a success compared to when business people hire artists. And I think if you look at throughout the history of the entertainment industry, Disney, Pixar, Aardman, Bluth, you know, they were always creatives at the top who had heart about what they did. And they hired the management team around them that supported their vision and their business. So I think as long as you've got creativity, sorry, I know I've digressed there, that was a random thought in my head. But going back to the advice to the students coming out, I would say specialization, you know, try and get your niche within a niche within a niche, you know. Like, you can't be everything. I mean, I think generally speaking, the courses are obliged to teach a very broad range of skills. You know, we'll teach you storyboards right through to making a full short film. I just think, where do you even start looking at that portfolio? Whereas if they had a bit more specialization, if somebody was the most amazing storyboard artist, you know, brilliant, focus on that, spend a year developing that in college, and very good opportunities for you.
From an employment point of view.
From an employment point of view.
But from a self-employment, say if they like what you did in setting up your own animation company, is that much harder now than it would have been, or is it an option?
I mean, it's so much easier. I mean, like it's all about content. You look at Sminky Shorts; he makes those wonderful things down in his bedroom. You know, it's all about the idea and the content. When we started off back in 1996, when we got our first computer, it cost £30,000 at the time. We got 2 PCs and Animo digital ink and paint software. We couldn't get a loan anywhere in Ireland for that. We had to go to the UK because the UK would give you a loan on or a lease on software. So the idea that you couldn't even get software or you couldn't get a loan on a computer in Ireland at the time is bonkers now. Everybody has a computer. Your phone is better than the computers we started off on.
Okay, and just what we usually end with is just your advice for startups generally. I mean, what do you think are the most important features a startup needs or attributes? obviously, looking from your career, it seems, from the bootstrapping and the longevity, tenacity and persistence and sticking with it is a big thing, yeah?
I'm glad you said that, because for literally the first 10 years in front of my desk, there's a great quote by Calvin Coolidge, the former American president, about persistence, and it's well worth looking at. And it's not about the best people. I mean, because truthfully, guys, if I can do this, anybody here can. It's just hard work, persistence, a lot of luck, and a small bit of talent. I mean, that's the truth of it. So persistence is absolutely a motto that I would live and die by, and I think it is so important to just, if you believe in something, the money will come if your product is brilliant and you love what you do, and just work really hard at making a brilliant product.
Excellent, good advice. Okay, could you all give a big Limerick thank you to